Hello, hello, professionals. My name is Rico Aladdin, and I am the founder of Professional Lunch. Today, we have a very special guest. Her name is Vicki. I'm gonna give Vicki a chance to introduce herself and what she does. Vicki, it's such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank
How are
you.
you?
Thank you. I'm great. Thanks for inviting me.
No
It's a real pleasure
problem.
to be with you.
No problem. It's such a pleasure to have you here. Please tell us who you are and what you do.
Okay, I'm Vicki Schmidt. What do I do? Well, I work. My primary work. I'm retired. Okay,
Okay, that's good.
retired but working. And one of the things that I do in my retirement, as I've done for a while, is to lead groups of interested people to the Texas-Mexico border to look at our immigration system and to meet with people who have fled countries of violence and are trying to get into our country to have a safe and stable life. So that's in a nutshell what I do. I have a lot of other interests, of course. I like to travel. I do some writing. I'm a grandma, so
Okay.
I do grandma stuff with my 7 grandchildren. And so, yeah, things are good. As long as I have good health, those are the things I will continue to do.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about your background. Now you're retired, but you choose to do this work. But tell us a little bit about your background.
I grew up in Fargo, actually, not very far from where we are at NDSU. I was a child when it was North Dakota Agricultural College, so that goes back a ways. So I grew up in a home that, as an adoptee, so I write about what my life was like as an adoptee and how I interpret that and where it led me. When I was full-time working, I worked with the refugee community, finding sponsors and helping resettle people that had come from countries of violence. I also have done a lot with music, so I've done a lot of church work
Oh,
and spent a lot of time worship planning, and I was an organist for 60 years before I retired. So music's always been important, music art, photography. So travel with family, and also developed an organization called Sister Parish, where we link North American faith communities with marginalized communities of faith in Central America and Mexico.
okay.
So it's brought me into a whole lot of life learning experiences, life changing experiences, and so I now still work with the border issues, hoping to resume that now that the pandemic seems to be a little bit less. So yeah, that's some of the stuff I've done with my life.
Okay, that's cool. That's good. I understand. You've done a lot with music. You're a grandma. I mean, you have a lot going on. So, but I'm curious to know, given the work that you do now, what drives you into this work when you were in church, or I mean, because right now that's what you do. Yes.
What drives me? Well, I claim a faith base
Yes.
to what I do, and so I've been directed by the things that I believe in.
Yes.
And particularly I follow the followings of Jesus, but also other religious spiritual leaders have taught me. So what drives me is the desire to make the world a better place,
Yes.
to walk through it in a way that leaves an imprint of compassion and care and love, working for peace, working against war. I've done a lot of protesting of war because I think there's other ways to settle our disagreements than fighting. And so what's happening currently in our world is really painful to watch. How people are suffering that are innocent, children, women, men. So my driving force is, I guess my base is my spiritual beliefs, my spirituality. And then another thing that drives me is the relationships I've been in, the people that share their stories, talk about their woundedness, the things that have changed them, and hearing stories of the pain of people becomes internalized in a sense. And when I feel the pain of others, then I am driven to get rid of that pain, not only in myself, but for them. So those are some of the things I would say off the top drive me to what I'm doing.
Wow. Very, very nice. And I have known you for a number of years, and I know that you've been in part of so many organization in town, helping in the any way that you can. And I want to know that you talk about sister parish. So tell me a little bit about this organization. Is it still functioning? Is it still doing things?
Yep, I'm a co-founder of that back in 1988, and that came out of time that I spent in Central America during the war in El Salvador, the war in Guatemala, what was happening in Nicaragua with our U.S. involvement. So I was really confronted with challenges of how to respond to those stories and how to make my life, weave those into my life so that I could share those stories with other people. And I know everybody couldn't go like I could to Central America and Mexico to learn all this. So a friend of mine, Reverend Dick Fensky, and I decided that what we needed to do was invite people to come and see. And if they couldn't come and see for themselves, which was so life-changing for us, that we could bring the stories here. We could invite other people to enter into some kind of relationship with people who are experiencing material poverty. And so we formed an organization that would invite people of faith, congregations, various denominations, to become into a relationship with a community in Central America. Early on, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and also Oaxaca, Mexico. And then we did some, we call them linkages,
Yes.
or in Spanish it's called hermanamiento, where you walk side by side with people rather than the charity model of just dumping goods in their lap and thinking, well, I've done my thing, but to really accompany them in the struggle. And that means getting into relationships,
Yes.
face to face,
Yeah.
on the ground. There's a couple theories about that. One, which I really like to talk about, one is called the helicopter theory, where you fly into a country, you might drop literature, talk about Jesus or whatever, and stir up a lot of dust with the blades. People kind of run, and then they come and see what you're about. And then as fast as you land and drop all that stuff on people, you take off and you never see them again. But the other theory is called the ox cart theory, where you actually get into the ox cart with the people, ride the ruts, tip over with them if they tip over, but experience their life in the fullest way that you can. And company, that's accompaniment. It's not charity. But out of the relationship then may come an idea that we can work together on. So the sister parish model is built on what we say solidarity rather than charity. And that solidarity is a new face of charity. So we walk hand in hand. One of the men in Nicaragua said, we don't want a hand out, we want a hand on our shoulder.
Wow.
And that's such a beautiful image, isn't it?
Yes.
To think that we can accompany arm in arm, hand in hand, rather than we know what you need, we're going to give you this, and walk away from it, and 10 years later nothing is left, or 2 years later. You know, it's just a blitz of our idea of what people need rather than it coming from their heart and their need, and tell us how we can accompany them rather than put stuff on them.
You have your story in a brand new book now, Grace Gallops, and I started reading the book, and your story is such an amazing story, and we're gonna talk more about that as we get further in the conversation. But I want to know, because at the beginning of the book you said you couldn't imagine that you've been writing this today. So what started the idea of you writing the book?
Well, I had to answer that many times over when I was struggling with it. Why am I doing this? It's a lot of work. But through the years, I've written a lot of stories, you know, just to kind of blog them or to put them in a diary or write an article for something, just a story now and then. And what it meant to me, what I saw and felt and heard and so on in some of these situations. And I thought I wanted my grandchildren to know who their grandma was and what influenced their grandma. And that was the start of it, maybe a legacy idea. And I had people reading some of the things I wrote, and they said, well, you should share this with more people. And I hesitated a long time, but then I had to figure out why what would the value be in sharing my story? I mean, writing is a tool for healing. Sharing stories is a tool for healing, especially if you had some trauma. Put it on paper, share it with someone else. So that's where it started. And during the pandemic, I had a lot more time,
Yes,
as we all did, maybe.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to meetings all the time, and I started pulling the things together and under themes, like working with refugees. What are some of the stories of refugees I've worked with that have changed my life or brought me into new understanding? Or what was it about the sister parish experiences in Latin America that totally changed my life? There's two words that I don't know Greek.
Okay.
But I know two words.
Neither do I.
But two words I know are chronos and kairos. And chronos is the word for, we walk along a chronological kind of timeline in our lives. And, you're born, you do this, you do that, right along here. But kairos are the moments that break into that and maybe shatter one's life, or at least brings a new learning or something to think about. And we often miss those moments. They come and go pretty quickly. It's the old carpe diem, seize the day. Know what might crash into your regular routines, and maybe grab hold and see where it's going to go.
Okay.
So I would say a lot of my stories are kairos stories. Going along, what I was thinking was pretty normal, and then something happened. And then, wow, I have to rethink my whole life sometimes. What do I believe? What can I do to reach out to people who are materially poor, but I've learned are spiritually rich? They've taught me a lot about my own faith, how to understand it, what my values are, because I'm a person of white privilege. I didn't know that for many years. I didn't understand that, and I'm still not sure what all that means, but what does that mean for my life? Because I have everything I need and more. I have a lot of wants, but are they needs? So that living with people in squatter settlements, for instance, with dirt floors and slab board walls and very little means. In fact, many times they don't find enough food to eat in the day. What does that mean for me, who has I've not even thought about the fact that I can go to the cupboard and get anything I want anytime I want. And if I don't have it, I can go to the store and I have money and I can buy it. So those are the kinds of confrontations, experiences I wanted to share. I wanted to share with my grandchildren, first of all, but I realized I had a greater calling to tell other people the things that I'd learned. Not to judge them, or not to lay guilt on people, but what I personally, this is my story. Someone told me once, you're an expert in your story. No one can take it from you. And what you saw and felt and heard, that's your story to share. Not what someone else should feel, but this is what I felt and this is what I saw. And nobody can take that from me, right?
Yes.
So that makes me an expert in my story.
Yeah,
you an expert in your story.
Absolutely. Yes, so this is where we are right now, and we're going to talk much more about the book. And in the book, you talk about refugees. We're going to talk about all of this in the next part of the conversation. But right now, we're going to take a pause, and we will be right back. All right, we are back with Vicki, and we are continuing the conversation, and it's going so well here. Remember, this is Professional Lunch today. Our guest is a writer, and she has been doing the kind of work that really can attract any professionals. And as I say many times, the reason why we bring different guests to Professional Lunch is because we want, if any new professionals out there who are working and wants to give back to the world, this is a perfect example that we have today. Vicki has been all over the world, and in her in her work trying to help wherever she can. And so today is such a pleasure to have you here, Vicki. I hope we are not asking any question that is outside of what you were expecting, but we're going to continue the conversation and we'll talk more about the book. So right now, what I'm curious to know is some of the things that over the years, it can be from your career, it can be from the kind of work that you are doing right now. Tell me give me at least 3 examples of the things that you really love about doing it. It can be, it can be from Fargo, Moorhead. It can be from Cape Town in South Africa. It can be from some of the places that you've been over the years. So please give me some examples of some of the things that you really love about doing this.
Wow, 3 examples. Well, you mentioned Cape Town, and that's one of my favorite places in the world, Cape Town, South Africa. It was hard to be there because I was pretty naive and I didn't understand apartheid at the time. The people I visited there were the most loving, caring people, but they were not white. And it was really the first time that I was immersed in the culture of people that I knew before. I knew because the one person was a student in the U.S. and I met him. But what I loved was finding and understanding hospitality, excuse me, from other cultures and how they reached out to me when I was expecting to be the one reaching out. That's something that I've learned to love because I now know that it happens so that I anticipate that kind of hospitality, and I've learned from it for my own life. How do I give hospitality to the stranger? I love being in a relationship with new people because I know if I'm open to them, I will learn. I will learn something important about my life and their life both. So being in relationship is one of my big words in this book, is what relationships can mean to us. I love to play with people. Their lightheartedness sometimes, it just takes me away from the heaviness of things. But I love learning. I love cultural food.
Yes.
Who doesn't, maybe, but so there's so many things to love about being around in the world. I love Fargo. I grew up here. I came back here to live out the rest of my life, probably. The people are many cultures here, and that's one thing I love about Fargo is the way that it has become more diverse, not so homogeneous, but more inclusive, and we're still working on all that, working on it. How do we find ways to be more inclusive, more diverse, and to do that in a sense of community, real community, where we grow together in our understanding and love for each other and honoring each other. I didn't count. Was that 3?
No, you can keep going. You have a little more time. You can keep going. You can share more if you like. I mean, you can think of, a place, maybe, right, you talk about Cape Town, and you can think of an event that happens, maybe in Fargo, Moorhead, maybe in, at the border or something. It can be something you do that highlight, let's say, oh, this is why I do this. This is why, despite of the challenges, I am going to continue to do this. That's what I'm looking for, because the purpose, what we want to happen with professional lunch is when we talk to professionals, people that are out there doing whatever the career might be, is a student might be watching this right now, say, in my lifetime, I want to make sure that I give back this way. I want to do this, because once I ask you to share what you love, and then my next part of the conversation will be asking you to share the challenges. If somebody know what you love about something and they know the challenges, depending on how they feel in their heart, they will make the decision whether to do this or not. And that's something that I think that is worth knowing, right? So if you can share something with me that happens, maybe an example, somebody that you help along the way, someone that the organization that you work for help along the way. that, a success story like that that really make you hit you deep down in your heart, saying, this is why, regardless of what happens, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna continue to do this?
Well, one primary area of seeing a joy come out of
Yes.
kind of almost death situations, when people are hurting really badly. So I worked with a lot of refugees. We had 2 unaccompanied minors from Vietnam that we had for 4 years. They were put on a boat by their parents. One who refused to go, and his father put a gun to his head and said, "You're getting on this boat." Because they were of the age in Vietnam to be conscripted into a war that was going on along the border of Vietnam and Cambodia. And they were conscripting young people, young girls, young boys, and these kids were 12 and 13 at the time. 80% of those kids didn't come back. That's a pretty high rate of death. And so their parents, they were cousins. The 2 parents, the fathers were brothers, and they decided they wanted to get the boys out of Vietnam at any cost. So they collected gold bars from family members, put together the money to pay their way on this boat. 470 some people on a 75-foot boat.
Wow.
Crowded, not enough food, not enough water, and they made the perilous trip to Indonesia. They saw people die next to them and thrown overboard. It was terrible. I mean, imagine a 12 and 13-year-old seeing this and experiencing this. I ended up in a refugee camp, and eventually they were vetted to come to the United States as refugee children, unaccompanied minors. And they somehow ended up in where we were living in Bemidji, Minnesota at the time. They landed, it was March. It was cold. They'd never experienced this temperature under 50 degrees roughly. And then they were in the middle of a snow bank, literally. So they had a really hard time, and we did too, because we didn't understand the culture. We didn't understand their pain. We tried to understand what it was like for them to be sent away so far with no knowledge of where they would end up. Try to imagine what the parents were feeling. They literally sent them off in the world hoping that someone would save them from the war and from the things that they were up against in Vietnam. So they lived with us for 4 years, graduated from Bemidji High School, and then went on their own. We had a lot of tough times. We didn't understand each other a lot, so there were a lot of hard feelings, and they were going through grief and trauma. So fast forward, they have returned to our family. They never left our family because they are in our hearts. But they are both very successful young men. They have families. They have, one works in firmware, which is somewhere between software and hardware in computer work. He's a millionaire.
Wow.
The other one is a manager of 12 brake shops in Tucson area, Chandler, Arizona. Both very, very successful. They call us, we visit back and forth. They call us mom and dad. We went to Vietnam and visited the family of one of them. The mom met us at the airport, and it was clear she'd practiced this, but she said, "I, Wynn's mother, thank you for my son." And it was just like we burst into tears because I never expected to meet his mom. She never expected to meet me or my husband. We met the other one's dad out in San Francisco area. He has come to the United States. His son brought him and some siblings to the U.S. And it was the same kind of thing. He said, he can't speak English, but the interpretation was, "I thank you for being a parent to my son when we couldn't. And I never expected to meet you." And he burst into tears, and so did I. So
Even hearing about it, I mean,
coming,
it's really just hitting me really hard right now.
Yeah, well, when you're separated from family at a young age, and a parent launches a child, this happened. I mean, that's a beautiful story to me.
Yes.
Because they are indeed our family,
Yes.
without question. And they, like I said, they still call us mom and dad. And
Yes.
when we experienced the flood of 1997 and lost our home here along the Cheyenne River, one of them sent us $1,000 a month
Wow.
to help us.
Yes.
Well, you helped me, now I help you. So there's other refugee stories like that too, that during the flood of 97, one man from Kurdistan, from Iraq, he had just had ear surgery and he came out to help fill sandbags.
Wow.
And I said, you need to be in the house. You're not supposed to be in the cold. You're not supposed to be lifting. And he said, when I come, you, and this is the way he said it, you help me. Now I help you.
Wow.
Period. End of
it.
end of the thing. So that kind of beauty rises out of the ashes for me.
Yes.
So many stories like that people who have come through so much pain understand what it means to give it back, for
Yes.
instance. And so there's so many, and we've had foster children where I've seen kids just come from really, really tough situations of abuse, emotional, physical abuse, sexual abuse, who have been able to be resilient. And that's a word I use a lot too, resilience, for the refugee people, for foster kids, for people who've been through trauma, illness, be resilience. And for me, it was adoption and my adoption story, to claim resilience and move on in life with a positive way.
Yes. Yes. I really like in chapter 3 of the book. I want to, if you're watching this or whoever's watching here, I want everybody to kind of get an idea of what the book looks like, and then they can check it out and stuff. So in chapter 3 of the book, you talk about welcoming the stranger, and I really like a paragraph in page 129, I think it is, when it talks about refugee. Right. When I read about these kind of stories, I didn't come to America as a refugee. I came primarily to study. But it's kind of hard not to give back when you come to America. You see the opportunities that are available to you. Whether it's at the food pantry, whether it's a volunteer at my church, whether it's going to different events, it's really, if you come to this country and you are enjoying these opportunities, right? It's almost, if the opportunity comes in front of you to help, I don't see how you can say no, right? And it goes to the point that and you see people have different way they think about refugee people from different countries, and I gotta tell you, I rarely, almost never experience that kind of thing, because I see the possibilities, the opportunities in every situation. But I don't want to change anybody's mind when it comes to refugee. But if you get to know people, right? You get to know some people, you can realize sometimes it's that chance that you don't get by knowing them that stop you from connecting with them, from loving them, from serving them. So, and I really, really want you to touch on that. And I don't think I can tell you anything new when it comes to refugee, because you've been all over the world, you've been over the border, and I don't think we have time today to just go all over the thing. But I want you to tell me, right, throughout the years, have you helped, or your organization help refugees here in Fargo? Like people, not people that come from the Fargo, but people here. Because if you are in Fargo, you help someone, like you give somebody clothing, a place to stay, something like that. That's almost the same thing you do for somebody from a different country. I want you to kind of compare that, so that people can understand that just because you do it for somebody that is from a different country, it's no different than doing it here. You understand what I'm trying to say?
To apply those same principles to people who are already here?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So talk to me about a situation where you help someone that is here in the same way you help a refugee. Because people tend to believe that the refugee, they see the name, right? They see the way because you come from a country. But me doing it as somebody from a different country and you doing it as somebody from here, do you see that there is no difference? Do you see that what I'm trying to say? There's no difference at all whether you help someone here whether you help somebody from a different country, right?
I think, the principle, the guiding principle is who's in front of you?
Yes.
Who's
The
in front of you
person.
right now? And what is the need? And is there something I can share? Is there something I can do to accompany them through the struggle? I think of the indigenous population here, who were here long before we were. So in the sense, I'm an invader on the land of those that came before me. But I think, again, I come back to the word relationship. We don't learn unless we are vulnerable. And it takes a certain amount of vulnerability to put ourselves out there. And we can see the person in front of us and just walk the other way.
Yes.
Or we can take time to listen to them, to hear their story, to see where my story might join theirs somehow. And so in a sense, it's in my thinking, it's not, is it person from a refugee, or is it a person who's been their whole life, has maybe mental health issues or physical health issues? Is someone just that needs help getting across the street?
Yes.
Is it someone that, maybe has a need for a meal?
Yeah.
So it's hard to separate that for me. Who's in front of me right now, and what is my relationship going to be? I can choose.
Yes.
I can choose to be in relationship for 1 minute, or I can choose to walk with them further into their life. But it's always a choice, and it's always a risk.
Yes.
I think when I finished my book and put it out there for the world, I thought, okay, this feels really vulnerable. Someone's going to know much more about me than they want to know. Or that, what will they think about who I am once they know these things about me? But I realized that pretty much all the things that I've experienced, I had to be vulnerable to experience them.
Yes.
I can't just do anything without risk. Risk might be minimal or might be very big.
Yes.
Emotional exposure, to share my emotions, to share my experiences, that's a risk.
Yes. Yes.
People have not always been happy with the things I've done, like protesting war. They've called me all kinds of names. I can't say I've had death threats, but I've had threats against me, like things that would make me anxious about their feelings about me. And then I have to think about my whole family. When I first came back from El Salvador in 1984, I had to think about my 3 preschool kids and my husband, who's a pastor, and what's this going to mean for the church? Because I gotta share what I know. And U.S. involvement in those countries was something that just shocked me. I didn't know how involved. We were giving $1 million a day to the little tiny country of El Salvador to fight. And I was hearing the stories of people who understood it was my country that was causing a lot of the disturbances to their lives, the deaths, supporting death squads and things that, I had to talk about that when I got back. And I was really vulnerable. And people didn't like it. How can you talk against our country? Well, I'm talking about the things, our policies. What are we doing down the pipeline to injure other people who are just like you and me? So, that's an awareness raising thing, and I felt called to do that.
Yes. Yeah, we're gonna take another pause, but I think I have to say that you summarized what I was trying to say in a way, which is seeing the person in front of you, right? Whether the person is from your backyard here in Fargo or Moorhead, or whether the person is from somewhere, around the world. And I guess that's why I say sometimes, helping someone, it should be about helping who is in front of you. So I guess that's a very good point. I'm glad you mentioned you say it that way. So we're gonna take another pause, and we will be right back. Okay. All right. We are back. We have Vicky today. Vicky is telling us some powerful stories. I'm sitting here almost tearing up because the stories are very powerful. And I want you to repeat what you just said about the title of the book. It's so powerful. I want the people that are watching this about the title, the Grace Gallops. That was the last part. I can remember the first part. Tell us again about that. When we were on the book, you were talking about the title.
Yeah, Grace Gallops. People say, what does that mean?
Yeah.
In fact, one person thought I said Grace Scallops. So no, it's not Grace Scallops. So the artwork is done by an artist that lived in Los Angeles. I met many years ago, John August Swanson, and he depicts the story of the prodigal son, and many people know the story from the Bible about the son who wants his inheritance because he wants to live it up in the world, and he goes out and tries out a bunch of things and lives a raucous life and ends up losing everything and then having to eat with the pigs because he has nothing. So he finally decides, I gotta go home. This is not working.
Yeah.
But what's my father gonna say? And so he plods along on the way home thinking, I don't know what to tell my dad. I don't know if he's going to let me come home because I've really messed up. I've squandered everything. And meanwhile, he gets close to home and his father sees what he knows is his son coming across the field. And he runs toward the son with open arms, no questions, just wanting to, joyful that he's home. And so the line that I heard in a sermon from my husband Peter one time was, guilt walks with a heavy step, but grace gallops.
Wow, I have to repeat it now so I don't forget it anymore. Guilt walks with a heavy step, but grace gallops.
Yep.
Wow, this is powerful.
And that's an image of God. That's the image that God is. I've screwed up a lot in my life.
Yes.
And squandered precious time and precious resources, but I'm still wrapped in grace that God gives. The grace gallops toward me, to you,
yes,
to all of us. So that's where the theme came from, and so a lot of the stories about how I've been led through grace and how grace continues to be a major. I don't always recognize it. I don't always accept it, but it's still there.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Okay, we're gonna get to the part of the conversation that I truly enjoy, because a lot of times people can choose to do things and they get stuff that they like, but I'm really curious about the challenges, right? Leaving your family behind, going to a different country, traveling all the time. There must be a lot of challenges, but I want you to focus on 3 major challenges that you think, if a young professional is out there, somebody who is interested in getting involved like this, what are some of the top challenges that you think they must be somewhat ready for or expecting, as they embark on such journey?
The first challenge I would say is one that I have learned and have repeated, and it's your comfort zone can become your prison.
Ooh, wow.
So if we don't step out of our comfort zone, which is a challenge because
Vicky, I'm sorry. Please say that again. Please say that again about your comfort zone. Please, for everybody to hear it again, please.
Our comfort zone can become our prison.
Yes.
We don't want to leave it because it's comfortable.
Yeah.
But to enter into the world and to, it takes leaving that comfort zone.
Yes.
And that's a challenge because I know when I came back from my first trip to Central America and I told my neighbor, I came over and said, I'm going to tell you about this. And she said, I don't want to hear about it.
Wow.
I'm happy the way I am. I don't want to know anything that you've experienced. And she didn't want to disrupt her comfortable life, which I would have, believe me.
Wow. How did that make you feel when she refused right then and there?
Well, I respected it.
Okay.
I mean, that was who she is, and I didn't want to violate her request. And that's the other challenge, is how do we tell our stories in a way that is real, accurate, but non-judgmental. And what's helped me with that is when I've learned something really powerful, it helps me to go back to where I was before I knew that. Before I knew this is what I felt. This is what I thought I knew. And I thought it was comfortable. And so if I put myself back at that place, I can better relate to somebody who hasn't had the experiences I've had. Now that's not something I like doing, because I want to just say, you got to know this. You got to understand. And so the challenge of being non-judgmental, because not everybody will take it in. They can't take it in if they haven't personally experienced it. So it's my task, again, to say this is what I saw, this is what I heard, and this is what I felt. Take it or leave it. It's my story. It might irritate them. It might cause them to think about something in a new way. And the stories I've written in the book that's what I've tried to stick with. This is my story.
Yes.
It's not yours, but this is mine. And if you listen to it, maybe you'll have a new thought or a new way to respond to something in the world. Another challenge is to smarten up about things. When I went to South Africa, I was very naive. I'd heard of Nelson Mandela. I stood on Table Mountain and looked at Robben Island, where he was already in prison, and I didn't even know it.
Wow.
So it's very ignorant. I didn't understand apartheid. I didn't know really what it was until I lived with non-white people. I wish I had known more, but that was the spark that opened the door. So again, those Kairos moments that help you, or I should say help me, think in a different way about what I thought was true. The change comes around and about by entering in relationships, being vulnerable, taking the risks, getting out of the comfort zone, and not let it be our prison. Because we're stuck there. We're stuck there.
Yes. Oh,
really
goodness.
stuck.
This is so deep. This is so deep. Talking about this, our comfort can be our prison. That's I don't know how. I'm gonna have to memorize this line over and say it over and over again until I memorize it.
Write it down.
Yes, I will write it down. Absolutely. Can you think of traveling and leaving your family behind? How do you explain that? Because everything we do with Professional Lunch is to create a reality for someone, a young professional who's watching it, saying that I want to be like that, but they have to be aware of some of the things that comes in between in doing that. So for instance, somebody wants to involve in doing nonprofit work, involved with organization to travel the world to help, with refugees, whatever the case may be. They need to know that sometimes you leave your family behind. That may not be an easy thing to do. So tell us about challenges like that. How do you deal with that when you have to travel?
Well, when my children were young, it was much more of a challenge.
Okay.
And Peter would have to bear the work of 3 preschool children when I first went, which was hard for him. I don't go for long periods of time either. I mean, but I remember, I mentioned it earlier, coming back to my family with 3 young children, living along the Mississippi River in a 6-bedroom home.
Wow.
How do I relay that to my family? Because they couldn't all go. Since that time, though, all of our 3 grown now children have experienced some of those with me. They've gone to Guatemala with me or to the border, have been involved when people from our sister parish, for instance, in Guatemala have come north to be with us, that exchange. So they understand more about when I was gone when they were younger. But it was hard. There's no getting around it. But I knew I would always come back. And they trusted I would always come back. I remember one time my daughter took a phone call from someone who was asking for me, and she said, well, I don't know where my mom is right now. She's in Kansas or Nebraska or somewhere. They didn't know, because I had been coming and going, setting up this new organization. And, but it was always a priority for me to be at their any activities they had. And I often scheduled things around that.
Yeah.
Or canceled because something came up. So it's a tight balance. It's a tough balance when you're striking out, and you have to have a mate that's going to understand
Yes.
your calling, your personal calling. And I call it a calling.
Okay.
I call it that.
Yes.
And I believe God has been active in my life that way to help lead and guide me through grace and love. And I believe that we are all made in the image of God,
Yes.
everyone. And so to not try to segment people out into gay, lesbian people or black people or brown people or Native Americans, but we are all one. And so to work to that end, that's my calling. With foster kids, with refugees, with my own family, what do I want to teach them? We had a young man from Cuba living with us for a while. He had escaped, it was a time called the Mariel boat, I don't know, it was evacuation, but people were leaving in thousands from Cuba, and his boat sank. And there were, the Coast Guard was aware of this. Someone had sabotaged the boat, and so it popped. It was weakened, and he was floating in the Atlantic off the coast of Florida, and a helicopter picked up him and one other survivor, and everyone else died.
Wow.
So he, by a long, circuitous route, ended up in our home in Bemidji. Too long to tell all that, but he had PTSD.
Wow.
And he would walk the streets of Bemidji, and he was profiled, and he would panic because he just had fear. And one time, the fight or flight thing, and he decided he one day he just had to go. He didn't know where, and he took a car from someone he knew and was apprehended and brought back to Bemidji and put in jail. And he was in jail for much longer than his final sentence was, but we were advocating for him. And finally, he came home to our house, and the neighbor girl was over playing with our little girl, Anna. And Angie said, "Well, who is that?" Because she hadn't seen Ochoa before. And Anna, without batting an eye or stop playing, she said, "Oh, that's Ochoa. That's my brother from the jail."
Wow.
And she just saw that he was part of her family, and he happened to have been in jail, but now he's home, and it wasn't
happy to see.
Yeah, it was like part of life. And we had, at that time, we had 2 men from Ethiopia and 2 from Czechoslovakia living with us at the same time.
Wow.
And so many awareness things then that happened. We were having a dinner, and I made 2 chickens because there were 10 of us. We had the 2 boys from Vietnam too. So we had like 4 cultures around our table. And Ochoa sat, we were all digging into these 2 chickens and the meal, and he was just sitting there, just glum looking. And I thought, what's going on? And he said, in my country, 1 chicken, 1 month. This dinner, 2 chickens, 1 meal.
Wow.
And my kids heard that, and it's the challenge. How do we relate those kind of things to the people around us?
Yeah.
Our children, they would say now that they learned a lot from it. They didn't always like it, but they have gone on to live lives of service.
Yes.
So we don't know what our challenges, where they take us and where they end us up and bring us in the end.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. Get your husband or your wife or your partner to be on the same page with you, because that can get hard. And when you get involved in this, and oh man, this conversation, if we were to tap into everything that I have on my mind to talk about today, won't be, this professional lunch would go on and on and on. But, I am so glad that you are here, Vicki, and talking about the challenges and the joy of doing this kind of work. And also the book, I want to give you a moment to talk about the book, where people can find the book. Those who are interested in finding it. It's called Grace Gallops, Guilt, What on empty steps
with heavy steps.
with heavy steps,
But
Grace
Grace
Gallops. So
Yeah.
that's something that you have to remember. And I don't think that means just whether you are a Christian or a different religion, and everybody can experience grace. So that much I believe. So this book, I'm gonna give Vicki a moment to tell people who are watching this right now or listening to it where they can find the book, and they can, how they can reach you or, talk about it.
Well, to reach me, just type in my name, Vicki Vogel Schmidt, and I pop right up. And then the Grace Gallops book is there. It's available on Amazon.com, both in softcover and Kindle. But locally, Fergusson Books in West Fargo, Melberg Books in Moorhead, Red River Coffee in South Fargo is selling it. So Fergusson, they're all independent places. So they all carry it, and you can get it directly from me too by contacting me through the internet.
Okay. Sounds good. Now, Vicki, any advice you have for young professionals out there? Because that's what professional lunch is about. I can't stress this enough. It's about creating a platform that can connect less experienced professionals with more experienced professionals, retired professionals, and that way they can learn from them as they are entering their professional lives. So anything that you can tell, any advice you can give that will serve them as tips and tricks, I call it, for them to better navigate this kind of work when it comes to joy, when it comes to challenges. Tell us what you think, give them some advice.
Well, my first piece of advice, which I'm not used to giving really, get out of the comfort zone.
Yes.
Step out, open your heart, open your eyes and ears to the people in front of you. Think about ways you can be in relationship with people and listen. Always listen before judging and before deciding what somebody needs. Listen to them and what they bring to you first, because it'll be a gift. Look for the gifts. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Share your story where it's appropriate. The things that might help you relate to someone of another culture or just your neighbor next door. It's about relationships and being open.
Yes.
And being open to the grace that surrounds you.
Yes.
Welcome it, invite it, carry it, and you'll find an adventure you weren't ready for.
Wow, very cool. My biggest takeaway today is your comfort zone can be your prison. And I think this one, I'm gonna keep that for a long time to come, because your comfort zone can be your prison. And as a young professional, you should know that. You should know that your comfort zone can be your prison, because some of the ideas that you have, you feel that you have that is stopping you from accomplishing them, is because you are letting your comfort zone be your prison. Okay, so Vicki, thank you so much for talking to me today about your career, your experiences, about pretty much your life and all the things you've experienced. And I know that the book, I'm going to finish reading the book, because now I have more reason to continue reading the whole book. And then hopefully I will leave the door open again so that we can meet again for another professional lunch where we continue to tell us how the book is going and what are the new people, the new relationships that you are building because of the book.
Yeah, that's been a gift too.
So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Now, this is the part that I tell you. It's up to you to make today a great day. So have a great day.